The desert didn't care about shame. Clara learned that within the first hour. Her father's carriage disappeared into the heat shimmer before she'd even caught her breath, wheels churning up dust that settled on her tongue like ash. She stood there, abandoned at an outpost that barely qualified as civilization. 3 buildings, a dry well, and a hitching post that looked ready to collapse. Rowan Hale hadn't said a word since her father left. He just stood there, 20 feet away, studying her the way you'd study a problem you didn't ask for but got stuck with anyway. Clara pulled her shawl tighter, though the heat made it pointless. The fabric was soaked through, clinging to shoulders that had always been too broad, arms that had always been too thick. Back in Philadelphia, her mother had spent a fortune on dressmakers who could minimize her figure, as if Clara's body was a scandal that needed hiding. Out here, there were no dressmakers, no mirrors, no parlor rooms where women whispered behind their fans about, "Such a shame, really, with that face, if only she'd—" "You got walking boots?" Clara jerked her head up. Rowan's voice was rough, like he didn't use it much. What?" He nodded at her feet. She was wearing kid leather shoes with pearl buttons, the kind you wore to garden parties. They were already ruined, caked in red dirt. "Boots," he repeated, "for walking." "I don't... No. I wasn't told I'd need... You'll need them." He turned and walked toward a mule tied to the post. Clara watched him move, economical, no wasted motion. He wasn't tall, maybe 5'10", but he carried himself like someone who'd learned young that size wasn't what kept you alive. "Wait." Her voice came out shakier than she wanted. "Where are we going?" "Home." "And where is that?" "Far." He swung up onto the mule, settled into the saddle, then finally looked at her directly. His eyes were dark, unreadable, under the brim of his hat. "Can you ride?" Clara felt heat flood her face that had nothing to do with the sun. My father didn't think it appropriate for a woman of for someone like me to—" "Can't ride," Rowan said flatly. Not a question. "No." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he dismounted, walked to a second mule she hadn't noticed, this one loaded with supplies, and started adjusting straps. "We'll walk then. First few miles, anyway." "I can walk," Clara said quickly. Too quickly, defensive. Rowan didn't look up. "Didn't say you couldn't." But she heard what he didn't say. "We'll see." She'd heard that tone her whole life. From her father, who'd stopped believing in her somewhere around her 12th birthday. From her mother, who'd tried everything, diets, exercises, even a doctor from New York who prescribed pills that made Clara's heart race and her hands shake. From the young men at balls who'd ask her to dance out of politeness, then spend the whole waltz looking over her shoulder for someone prettier, smaller, better. "We'll see" always meant you'll fail. Rowan started walking. The mules followed. Clara stood there for 3 full seconds before she realized he wasn't going to wait, wasn't going to coax or encourage or tell her it would be all right. She hurried after him, her shoes slipping in the loose dirt. The first mile nearly killed her. Not literally, though it felt close. Clara's corset dug into her ribs with every breath, stays jabbing like small knives. Her dress, pale blue silk that had cost more than most people earned in a month, snagged on scrub brush and dragged in the dirt. Sweat poured down her back, soaked through her chemise, made her stockings stick to her legs. Rowan maintained a steady pace ahead, not fast, but relentless. He never looked back, never checked if she was keeping up. Clara's breath came in gasps. Her vision started to blur at the edges. "Keep going. Don't stop. Don't give him the satisfaction." Except, and this was the strangest part, Rowan didn't seem to be waiting for her to fail. He just walked. Like her struggle was her own business, not his entertainment. After what felt like hours, but was probably 20 minutes, Clara's shoe caught on a rock. She stumbled, went down hard on her hands and knees. The impact sent a shock through her wrists. One of her pearl buttons popped off and disappeared into the dirt. She knelt there, breathing hard, waiting for the comment. The sigh, the "I told you so," that always came. Footsteps approached, stopped beside her. "You hurt?" Clara looked up. Rowan stood outlined against the brutal sun, his face shadowed. "No," she lied. He crouched down, and she saw his face clearly for the first time. Weathered, maybe 35, with a scar running through his left eyebrow. Not handsome, too hard for that, but real in a way the men she'd known never were. "Your hands are bleeding." She looked down. He was right. Her palms were scraped raw, small rocks embedded in the skin. It's nothing. Probably not. Still needs cleaning. He stood, offered his hand. Clara stared at it, calloused, scarred, steady. She didn't take it. Couldn't. Accepting help felt like admitting defeat, and if she started admitting defeat now, she'd never stop. She got to her feet on her own, swaying slightly. Rowan's hand dropped. Stubborn. What? Nothing. Come on. He walked on. Clara followed, hands throbbing, shoes falling apart, dress ruined, everything in her body screaming to stop. She didn't stop. Bonches. They reached a creek as the sun started its descent. Clara had long since stopped thinking about anything except the next step. Her mind had gone blank, empty except for the rhythm of walking. Left foot, right foot, don't fall, don't stop, don't fall, don't stop. We'll camp here. Rowan's voice broke through her trance. She looked up, saw water, actual water, running over smooth stones. Trees clustered along the bank, their shade a blessing she could barely process. Sit, Rowan said, already unloading the mules. Clara wanted to argue. Instead, she stumbled to a flat rock and collapsed onto it, her legs giving out completely. She sat there, shaking, while Rowan moved around setting up camp with the same economic efficiency he did everything. He got a fire going, filled a canteen from the creek, brought it to her without a word. Clara took it with trembling hands and drank. The water was cool, clean, the best thing she'd ever tasted. She drank until her stomach hurt, then lowered the canteen and realized Rowan was watching her. What? The word came out hostile. You made it farther than I expected. She couldn't tell if that was an insult or a compliment. How far did you expect? Half a mile, maybe? Definitely an insult. Clara felt anger flare through her exhaustion. Because I'm fat. It was the first time she'd said the word out loud in years. Her mother always used euphemisms. Full-figured, Rubenesque, big-boned. Her father just avoided mentioning her body entirely, like if he didn't acknowledge it, it might stop existing. Rowan's expression didn't change. Because you're wearing a corset in the desert and shoes made for drawing rooms. Your size didn't slow you down. Your clothes did. He pulled a bundle from one of the packs and tossed it to her. Clara caught it awkwardly. What is this? Clothes. They'll fit better than what you're wearing. Better for what? Walking, riding, eventually. Living out here? Clara looked down at the bundle, then back at Rowan. You keep women's clothes in your pack? Bought them at the outpost, while your father was busy explaining how much of a burden you were going to be. The casual way he said it, like it was just information, not a wound, somehow made it worse. Clara's throat tightened. He said that? That I was a burden? Rowan fed another stick to the fire. He said a lot of things, most of it not worth repeating. Tell me anyway. Why? Because I want to know what I'm worth. What he traded me for. Rowan looked at her then, really looked at her. Something shifted in his expression, not pity, but something closer to recognition. 10 acres of scrubland on the South Ridge, he said quietly. Water rights to Miller's Creek, and $100 cash. Clara laughed. It came out sharp, broken. $100. That's what I cost. That's what he accepted. Different thing. Is it? Rowan didn't answer. He just pulled out a pot, filled it with water, started making coffee. Clara sat there holding the bundle of clothes, trying to make sense of a world where her father, the man who'd raised her, fed her, given her every material thing she'd ever needed, had valued her at less than a decent horse. The worst part? She wasn't even surprised. She changed behind a cluster of trees, her fingers fumbling with buttons and laces in the fading light. The corset came off first, and she gasped as her ribs expanded fully for the first time in hours. Red marks lined her torso where the stays had dug in. The clothes Rowan had bought were simple: a cotton shirt, canvas pants, a leather vest. They were men's clothes, sized large, but they fit better than anything in her wardrobe ever had. No pinching, no pulling, no trying to squeeze her into a shape she'd never been. She looked down at herself and felt strange. Exposed, maybe. Or free. She couldn't tell the difference. When she came back to the fire, Rowan handed her coffee without comment. She sat on her rock and sipped it, bitter and strong, while the sky turned purple and stars began to appear. Tomorrow will be harder, Rowan said eventually. Then today? Yeah. How is that possible? Today was flat. Tomorrow we start climbing. Clara closed her eyes. Every muscle in her body already hurt. The idea of climbing anything seemed impossible. I can't do this, she whispered. She expected him to agree, or to give her some meaningless encouragement about how she was stronger than she thought. Instead, he said, "Probably right." Her eyes snapped open. What? The woman who showed up today? She can't do this. He poured himself more coffee. So you'll have to be someone else. I don't understand. Out here, you get to choose. Every morning, you decide who you are. Who you were back in Philadelphia. That person doesn't exist anymore. Your father made sure of that when he left you. The words should have hurt. Instead, they felt like permission. What if I don't know how to be someone else? Then you learn. Same way you learn everything, by failing until you don't. Clara stared into her coffee. That's a terrible philosophy. It's the only one that works out here. They sat in silence after that, while the fire crackled and something howled in the distance. A coyote, maybe, or something worse. Clara thought about Philadelphia, about her bedroom with its silk curtains and mahogany furniture, about her mother's desperate attempts to make her marriageable, about the parties where she'd stood against the wall, invisible despite her size, while everyone else danced. She thought about her father's face when he'd handed her over to Rowan, cold, relieved, done with her. Who you were back in Philadelphia, that person doesn't exist anymore. Maybe that was true. Maybe that person was already gone, left behind at the outpost along with her ruined shoes and her pearl-button illusions about what her life was supposed to be. I'll try, she said quietly. Rowan nodded, like that was exactly what he'd expected her to say. Get some sleep. We leave at dawn. Clara didn't sleep. Her body was too exhausted and her mind too loud, replaying everything on a vicious loop. She lay on the bedroll Rowan had set out for her, far enough from the fire to be modest, close enough to feel its warmth, and stared at stars she'd never seen in the city. There were so many of them, thousands, millions. All that light from things that were probably already dead, traveling across impossible distances just to reach her eyes. She heard Rowan moving around, settling the mules, checking the perimeter. He didn't sleep either, not for a long time. When he finally did lie down, he kept his gun within reach, his body positioned between her and the darkness beyond the firelight, protecting her. Or maybe just protecting his investment, his $100 and 10 acres. Clara turned onto her side, her hip aching against the hard ground. Tomorrow would be worse, he'd said. Climbing, more walking, more pain. She should quit. Tell him to take her back. Beg her father to reconsider, promise to be better, smaller, less of a disappointment. Except she couldn't. Not because she was brave, she wasn't, but because going back meant admitting her father was right. That she was exactly what he'd always seen, a burden, a mistake, a daughter who'd failed at the one job society gave women. Be pretty, be small, be wanted. She'd failed at all three, but maybe out here those weren't the jobs that mattered. Boom. Dawn came cold and merciless. Rowan woke her by nudging her shoulder with his boot. Up. Clara groaned, every muscle protesting as she sat up. Her hands were stiff, scabs forming over the scrapes. Her legs felt like someone had beaten them with sticks. I can't move. You can, you just don't want to. What's the difference? One's a choice, other's a fact. You're choosing. He walked away before she could argue, already breaking down camp with the same efficient silence he did everything. Clara forced herself to stand. Her legs shook but held. She folded the bedroll badly, packed her things slowly, and by the time Rowan was ready to leave, she was upright and mostly functional. He handed her a piece of dried meat and some hardtack. Eat while we walk. Shouldn't we? No time. We're burning daylight. They started walking. The terrain began to shift, gentle slopes giving way to steeper inclines. Clara's breathing grew labored within minutes. The dried meat sat heavy in her stomach. But she kept walking. An hour in, her right shoe, already damaged, gave up completely. The sole separated from the upper, flapping with each step until it finally fell off entirely. Clara stopped, staring down at her stockinged foot. Rowan glanced back. What now? My shoe. He looked at her foot, then at the ruined shoe, then kept walking. So, take the other one off. Walk balanced. In my stockings? Rather walk lopsided. Clara bent down, removed her left shoe, and threw both of them into the scrub brush. She stood there in her stockings, feeling the ground rough and immediate beneath her feet. Good, Rowan said. Now you'll feel where you're stepping. They walked on. The rocks hurt, and thorns tore her stockings within a mile, but he was right. She could feel the ground now, could sense where to put her weight, how to balance, which stones would shift and which would hold. The climb got steeper. Clara's thighs burned, her lungs burned, everything burned. Can we stop? She gasped. Not yet. Not yet. Anger flared through her exhaustion. I said I need to stop. Rowan halted and turned around. For the first time, she saw something like impatience in his face. You need to stop, or you want to stop. What kind of question is that? Important one. You need to stop, we stop. You're about to collapse, about to hurt yourself bad, can't take another step, we stop. But if you just want to stop because it's hard, because you're tired, because you're not used to this? He shook his head. Out here, wanting doesn't matter. Only need matters. Clara's hands clenched into fists. You don't know what I need. You're right, so tell me. You need to stop? Or you just want to? She opened her mouth to say need. The lie was right there, ready, but something stopped her. Maybe pride, maybe stubbornness, maybe just the realization that out here, lying wouldn't save her. I want to, she admitted quietly. Rowan nodded. Then we keep going. Another mile, then we rest. He turned and walked on. Clara stood there for a moment, furious and exhausted, and something else she couldn't name. Then she followed. The mile felt infinite. Clara counted steps. 100, 200, lost count, started over. Her vision tunneled down to just Rowan's back, the mule's tails, the ground beneath her bleeding feet. One more step. One more. One more. When Rowan finally stopped, Clara collapsed where she stood. She didn't care about dignity or appearances. She just lay there in the dirt, chest heaving, tears streaming down her face from exhaustion. Rowan let her lie there. He tended the mules, pulled out water and more food, got a small fire going even though it was midday. After a while, he came over and sat a few feet away. You made the mile. Clara didn't respond. Couldn't. Back at the outpost, I figured you'd last maybe a day. 2 at most. Then you'd beg me to take you back, and I'd have to decide whether it was worth the trouble. She turned her head to look at him. And? Your trouble, he said, but maybe not the kind I thought. What's that supposed to mean? Means you're stubborn. Means you don't quit even when you should. Means you might actually make it. Make it where? Home. My place. Another 4 days if we keep this pace. 4 days. 4 more days of this. Clara closed her eyes. I'll die before then. Probably not. You're tougher than you look. I'm not tough. I'm just... She trailed off, not sure how to finish. Just what? Afraid of what happens if I stop. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then, that's the same thing. Out here anyway. He stood up, offered his hand again. This time, Clara took it. His grip was firm, calloused, and when he pulled her up, she felt the strength in it. Not just physical, but something deeper. The strength of someone who'd survived when surviving shouldn't have been possible. Rest 15 minutes, he said. Then we go again. Kotikes. The days blurred together. Walk, rest, walk, set camp, eat whatever Rowan caught or had packed. Sleep poorly. Wake early. Walk again. Clara's body began to change, not the way her mother's diet doctors had promised. She didn't lose weight, didn't shrink, didn't become the small woman everyone wanted her to be. Instead, she got harder. Her muscles, unused to anything more strenuous than climbing stairs, began to adapt. Her hands toughened. Her feet, bloody and torn for days, started to callous. The pain didn't stop, but it changed, became something she could work through, around, with. Rowan taught her things without seeming to teach. He'd point out a plant, mention it held water. He'd change course slightly, say the ground ahead was unstable. He'd hand her tasks, hold this rope, tie it this way, watch the mules while he scouted ahead. He never explained why. He just showed her, then expected her to remember. On the 3rd day, she rode a mule for the first time. Time you learned, Rowan said, like it was obvious. I told you, I can't. Can't and never learned are different. Come on. He showed her how to mount, how to sit, how to hold the reins. Clara's thighs screamed in protest. Her balance was terrible, and she nearly fell off twice in the first 10 minutes. But she didn't fall. And by afternoon, she was riding, badly, awkwardly, but riding. That night, as they made camp, Rowan said, You did good today. Clara looked up from the fire she was trying to start. Another skill he'd shown her, though she still couldn't get it right. I almost fell off. But you didn't. It was ugly. Ugly's fine. Dead is the problem. She went back to the fire, striking the flint again. Sparks, but no flame. She tried again. Again. Here. Rowan knelt beside her, adjusted her grip. Angle it more. There, see? The tinder caught. A small flame grew. Clara stared at it, this tiny fire she'd made, and felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Not pride exactly, more like possibility. Thank you, she said quietly. Rowan stood. For what? For not giving up on me. He looked at her strangely. Wasn't planning on it. My father did. Everyone back home did. Why wouldn't you? Because they're idiots. He said it so matter-of-factly that Clara almost laughed. You keep showing up. Keep trying. That counts for more than whatever size dress you wear. He walked away before she could respond, leaving Clara sitting by her small fire, tears streaming down her face for reasons she couldn't entirely explain. On the fourth day, they reached the house. It wasn't what Clara expected. Not a ranch house or homestead or anything remotely civilized. Just a cabin, weathered and small, built into the side of a hill with the mountains rising behind it. This is it? She asked. This is it? No grand entrance, no servants waiting, just a place to live, far from everything and everyone. Rowan dismounted and started unloading the mules. Clara sat on her mule. She'd gotten better at riding, though still not good, and looked at this place that was supposed to be home now. It looked like nowhere, like the end of the world, like freedom. You coming? Rowan asked. Clara climbed down, her legs steady beneath her. 4 days ago, she would have fallen. Now she landed solid, balanced. Yeah, she said, I'm coming. They walked toward the cabin together, and Clara realized that for the first time since her father's carriage had disappeared into the desert heat, she wasn't thinking about going back. She was thinking about what came next. The cabin had 2 rooms, one for living, fireplace, table, chairs that didn't match. One for sleeping, a single bed, a trunk, a window that looked out at nothing but sky. You take the bed, Rowan said. I'll sleep out here. Where? Floor's fine. Wasn't asking permission. He set her bag down and walked back outside, already moving on to the next task. Always the next task. Clara stood in the doorway of what was now her room and tried to process how thoroughly her life had changed. 1 week ago, she'd slept in a canopy bed with linen sheets. She'd had a closet full of dresses, a maid to help her dress, parents who ignored her but at least acknowledged her existence. Now she had a room barely big enough to turn around in, clothes that smelled like mule and smoke, and a man who'd bought her for the price of bad land. She should hate this, should be devastated. Instead, she felt awake, like she'd been sleeping for 23 years and only now opened her eyes. Clara walked to the window and looked out at the vast emptiness beyond. The desert stretched forever, broken only by rocks and scrub and distant mountains that looked like they were painted on the sky. It was harsh, unforgiving, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with prettiness. She understood suddenly why Rowan lived out here, why he'd chosen this nothing place at the edge of everything. Out here you couldn't hide, couldn't pretend to be something you weren't. The desert saw you clear and didn't care about anything except whether you survived. Clara put her hand against the glass, felt the heat of the afternoon sun trapped there. I'll survive, she whispered. I'll do more than that. Behind her, she heard Rowan moving around, settling the mules, starting on whatever endless work kept a place like this running. She turned from the window and went to help. Ishat. The work was constant, hauling water from the well, feeding the mules and chickens Clara hadn't known Rowan kept, mending fences that seemed to break daily, splitting wood, cooking meals that were just fuel, nothing fancy, washing clothes in a barrel and hanging them to dry on a line strung between 2 posts. Clara had never done any of it. In Philadelphia, servants had handled everything. Her only jobs had been to look presentable and not embarrass her parents. She'd failed at both. Out here, the jobs were different. Don't die. Don't quit. Don't expect anyone to do it for you. She failed at those, too, at first. Dropped a bucket of water and had to haul more. Cut herself with the axe and bled all over the kindling. Burned dinner so badly they ate jerky instead. Rowan never yelled, never criticized. He'd just show her a better way, then go back to his own work. It was infuriating. Don't you get frustrated? She asked one evening, after she'd managed to let the chickens out and spent an hour chasing them back into their coop. With what? With me. With having to teach me everything. With having this useless woman dumped on you. Rowan looked up from the harness he was mending. You're not useless. I can't do anything right. You did everything right back in your old life, didn't you? Clara blinked. What? All those society things. Dancing, manners, whatever. You did all that right? I tried to. And where'd it get you? The question hit harder than it should have. Here. Exactly. So maybe doing things right in that world doesn't matter. Maybe what matters is learning to do things wrong in this one until you figure it out. He went back to his harness. Clara stood there, chickens finally secured, covered in dust and feathers, and realized he was right. She'd spent her whole life trying to be perfect at things that didn't matter. Maybe it was time to be terrible at things that did. Weeks passed. The season began to shift, heat giving way to something slightly less brutal. Clara's body continued to change, not smaller, but different. Her shoulders broadened from hauling water, her arms developed definition from splitting wood, her legs grew solid from walking the property, checking fences, chasing escaped chickens. She learned to shoot after Rowan decided she needed to know how. What if I'm not here? He said, handing her an old rifle. What if something comes at you? Like what? Coyotes. Mountain lion, maybe. Men, sometimes. He taught her to load, aim, breathe, squeeze. She missed everything for the first week, hit the target occasionally in the second week. By the third week, she could hit what she aimed at more often than not. You're getting better, Rowan said, something almost like approval in his voice. I'm getting less terrible, Clara corrected. Not the same thing. Out here it is. She learned to read the sky, which clouds meant rain, which meant nothing. Learned to find water by watching where birds flew. Learned which snakes to avoid and which were harmless. Learned that silence wasn't emptiness, that the desert was full of life if you knew how to look. And slowly, carefully, she learned about Rowan. He didn't talk much, but when he did, Clara listened. He'd come out here 5 years ago, running from something he never named. Bought the land cheap from a man who'd given up trying to make it work. Built the cabin himself, one room at a time. Why here? Clara asked one night. Why so far from everything? Because far from everything is where I needed to be. Because of what you were running from. He looked at her across the fire. What makes you think I was running? Everyone who ends up out here is running from something. Including you? Clara thought about it. I wasn't running. I was thrown away. Not the same thing. No, she agreed. It's worse. Rowan poked at the fire with a stick. Being thrown away means you can become whoever you want. No one's watching. No one cares. It's freedom, if you're brave enough to take it. And if you're not brave, then you stay whoever they said you were. He looked at her again. You seem pretty brave to me. Clara laughed, bitter. I'm not brave, I'm just stubborn. Like I said, same thing out here, d'atu sa si ditamo. 2 months in, Clara realized she hadn't thought about Philadelphia in days. Hadn't wondered what her mother was doing, whether anyone missed her, if her father regretted his choice. She was too busy surviving to care about people who'd never cared about her. But one morning, she woke to the sound of horses. Multiple horses. Coming fast. Rowan was already up, already armed, standing in the doorway with his rifle. Stay inside, he said quietly. Who is it? Don't know, but people don't ride in here unless they want something. Clara grabbed the rifle he'd given her, the one she'd gotten less terrible with, and positioned herself by the window. 5 riders came into view. Well armed, well dressed, at least by frontier standards, and leading them, on a black horse that probably cost more than this entire property. Clara's breath stopped. Her father. He'd come back. Clara's hands tightened on the rifle, her palms suddenly slick, despite the calluses she'd earned over 2 months of hard work. Through the window, she watched her father dismount with the practiced ease of a man who'd spent his life commanding everything around him. He looked exactly the same. Tailored coat despite the dust, polished boots, that expression of perpetual disappointment carved into his face like something permanent. The 4 men with him fanned out, hands resting casually on their weapons. Not threatening exactly, just ready. Rowan stood motionless in the doorway, rifle held loose but prepared. Clara had learned to read his stillness. It wasn't calm, It was control, like a wire pulled so tight it could snap or hold depending on what the moment demanded. "Rowan Hale," her father called out, his voice carrying that boardroom authority that had terrified Clara her entire childhood. "I've come for my daughter." Rowan didn't move. "She's not yours anymore. We had a deal. A deal made under duress. I've reconsidered." "That's not how it works." "I'm making it how it works." Her father gestured, and two of his men shifted forward slightly. "I'm prepared to offer you double what we agreed upon. $200, the land deed torn up, and we all forget this unfortunate episode ever happened." Clara felt something cold settle in her stomach. He was buying her back. Like she was a horse he'd sold too cheap and now wanted to reclaim. "Not interested," Rowan said flatly. Her father's face hardened. "Don't be foolish. You're getting twice what you paid, and you avoid the burden of caring for someone clearly not suited to this life." "She seems suited fine to me." "Look at her." Her father's voice dripped contempt. "She's my daughter, and even I can admit she's not built for frontier living. She needs proper care, proper society, proper—" "She can hear you," Clara said, stepping into the doorway beside Rowan. Her father's eyes widened fractionally, the only indication of surprise he ever showed. His gaze traveled over her, taking in the men's clothes, the rifle, the sun-darkened skin, and work-roughened hands. "Clara," his voice softened in that calculated way he used when he wanted something. "Sweetheart, this has all been a terrible mistake. Your mother has been beside herself with worry. Come home. We'll fix this." "Fix what?" "All of it. This situation. We'll find you a suitable match, someone who understands. Someone who'll take damaged goods?" The words came out harder than she intended. "Someone desperate enough to overlook what I am?" Her father had the grace to look uncomfortable. "That's not what I meant." "Yes, it was. It's what you've always meant." Clara stepped fully outside, Rowan moving slightly to let her pass, but staying close. "You traded me away because I embarrassed you, because I wasn't the daughter you wanted. And now you want me back. Why? So you can try again? So you can parade me around until you find someone drunk enough or desperate enough to take me off your hands permanently?" "Clara, you're being unreasonable. I'm being honest. For the first time in my life, I'm being completely honest." She planted her feet, held the rifle properly, like Rowan had taught her. "I'm not going back." The silence that followed felt dangerous. Her father's face went through several expressions, surprise and anger, calculation, before settling on cold determination. "You don't have a choice." "Actually, she does," Rowan said quietly. "And she just made it." Her father ignored him, focused entirely on Clara. "I am your father. You will obey me in this." "You were my father," Clara corrected. "Then you sold me. You don't get to claim that relationship when it's convenient." "I did what I thought was best. You did what was easiest. There's a difference." Her father's jaw tightened. "If you don't come willingly, I'll have my men take you." "Try it," Rowan said, and something in his voice made all four hired men pause. "See how that works out." The standoff stretched. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs, but she didn't lower the rifle, didn't step back. She'd spent 23 years backing down, making herself smaller, apologizing for existing. Not anymore. Her father seemed to realize he was losing control of the situation. He switched tactics, his voice turning pleading. "Clara, please. Your mother misses you terribly. She cries every night. Don't you care about her at all?" The guilt hit like a fist. Her mother, weak, desperate, but never cruel. Clara had loved her once, before the love got buried under constant disappointment and endless attempts to fix what wasn't broken. "If she cared," Clara said slowly, "she would have stopped you from selling me. She would have fought for me. But she didn't, did she?" Her father's silence was answer enough. It was answer. "That's what I thought." Clara's voice cracked slightly, but she pushed through. "Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I hope she finds some peace. But I'm not coming back to be her project anymore." "You're being selfish." "Good. Maybe it's time I was." Her father stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned to Rowan. "You've poisoned her mind. Turned her against her own family." "I haven't turned her into anything," Rowan said. "Just stopped holding her back from who she already was. This isn't over." Her father swung back onto his horse, movement sharp with barely controlled rage. "I'll return with proper authority. A sheriff, perhaps. We'll see how brave you both feel then." "Sheriff's 3 days' ride from here," Rowan noted, "and he doesn't take kindly to men who try to break contracts, especially contracts witnessed and legal." We'll see about that. Her father wheeled his horse around. The hired men followed, casting uncertain glances back at Clara and Rowan. They disappeared into the desert heat, dust rising in their wake like smoke. Clara stood there until she couldn't see them anymore. Then her legs gave out. She sat down hard on the porch step, rifle clattering beside her, her whole body shaking. Rowan sat down next to her, not touching, just present. That was terrifying, Clara whispered. Yeah. Is he really going to come back with a sheriff? Probably try. Won't work, though. Contract's solid, and you're of age. No law is going to force you back. He seemed pretty confident. He's used to buying what he wants. Doesn't mean he'll get it. Clara pulled her knees up, wrapped her arms around them. I told my father I wasn't going back. I actually did that. You did. I think I'm going to throw up. That's normal. She looked at him sideways. Is it? First time you stand up to something that scared you your whole life? Yeah, pretty normal. He stood, offered his hand. Come on, you need water and probably food. Adrenaline makes you stupid if you don't take care of yourself. Clara let him pull her up. Her legs still shook, but they held. How do you know that? Experience. They went inside. Rowan got her water, made her drink the whole cup, then started cooking. Beans and salt pork, simple and fast. Clara sat at the table, watching her hands tremble, trying to process what had just happened. Do you think I did the right thing? She asked. Rowan didn't look up from the stove. Does it matter what I think? Yes. He was quiet for a moment, stirring the beans. I think you did the only thing you could do and still be able to look at yourself. That's not the same as right. Out here it is. Clara traced patterns in the wood grain of the table. He called me a burden. Right to your face, he said I was a burden. He did. And you still defended me. Clara, Rowan set the spoon down, turned to face her. Your father's an idiot. That's got nothing to do with you and everything to do with him being too stupid to see what's right in front of him. What's right in front of him? Someone who walked 4 days through the desert in shoes that fell apart. Someone who learned to ride even though she was terrified of falling. Someone who gets up every morning and does work she's never done before without complaining. He went back to cooking. Your father sees you as a burden because he's weak. Takes a weak man to throw away something valuable just because it doesn't look how he expected. Clara's throat tightened. You think I'm valuable? I think you're here. I think you're trying. That's more valuable than anything your father ever bought with his money. He dished out the beans, set a plate in front of her. Clara stared at it, this simple meal in this simple cabin, and felt something shift inside her chest. She'd spent her whole life waiting for someone to see her as valuable, to recognize her worth despite her size, her failures, her endless inadequacies. It had never occurred to her that value might be something you earned through survival, through showing up, through refusing to quit even when quitting seemed like the only reasonable option. Thank you, she said quietly. Rowan sat down across from her. For what? For not selling me back. Wasn't tempted. He offered you double. So? So that's a lot of money. Rowan shrugged. Money doesn't split wood or chase chickens or learn to shoot despite being scared of guns. You do. I'd say I got the better deal. He said it so casually, like it was obvious, like her worth wasn't something that needed debating or justifying or proving. Clara picked up her fork and started eating, blinking back tears that had nothing to do with sadness. The beans tasted like salvation. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed listening to the desert sounds, coyotes, wind, something small scurrying across the roof, and replayed the confrontation over and over in her mind. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her father's face. That mixture of anger and disgust when she'd refused to obey. Like she'd committed some unforgivable sin by choosing herself over his plans. Maybe she had. Maybe in his world, that was unforgivable. She got up, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, and walked into the main room. Rowan was asleep on his bedroll by the fire, breathing deep and even. His rifle lay within arm's reach, and even unconscious, he looked ready to move. Clara sat by the dying fire, feeding it small sticks to keep it alive. The flames cast shifting shadows on the walls, and she thought about all the versions of herself that had led to this moment. The little girl who'd tried so hard to be good. The teenager who'd starved herself trying to be thin. The young woman who'd stood against the wall at parties, invisible despite taking up so much space. All those versions felt distant now, like people she used to know but didn't particularly like. You all right? Clara jumped. Rowan was awake, propped up on one elbow, watching her. Sorry, didn't mean to wake you. You didn't. I don't sleep heavy out here. He sat up, ran a hand through his hair. What's wrong? Nothing. Everything. I don't know. She poked at the fire. Do you ever regret it? Taking me on? No. You answered that pretty fast. It's an easy question. Is it? Clara looked at him across the flames. I've been nothing but trouble since I got here. I can't do anything right. I break things and mess up constantly, and you're learning. That's the point. But wouldn't it be easier if you'd just taken my father's offer? $200 and no burden to deal with? Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood up, walked to the fire, and sat down next to her, closer than he usually got. You want to know the truth? He asked. Always. When your father first approached me about the deal, I said no. Flat out refused. I don't trade in people, and the whole thing felt wrong. Clara stared at him. Then why? He kept pushing, kept raising the price, adding the land, making it seem like I'd be stupid to refuse. And I kept thinking about the way he talked about you, like you were something broken that needed getting rid of. Rowan's jaw tightened. I've known men like your father, men who throw away anything that doesn't fit their idea of perfect. And I thought, maybe the best thing I could do was get you away from him. So you did it out of pity? No, I did it because I was angry. He looked at her directly. I was angry that a man could have a daughter and treat her like garbage. I was angry that you stood there and took it like you deserved it. I was angry at the whole stupid situation, so I said yes, figuring at minimum I could get you somewhere your father couldn't hurt you anymore. Clara's breath caught. And now? Now I'm glad I did. Not because I saved you or because you owe me something, but because you turned out to be exactly what this place needed. What does a place need? Someone alive in it. Someone who changes it just by being here. This cabin was just somewhere I existed before you showed up. Now it's... He trailed off, searching for words. Now it feels different. Better. Better how? Less empty. The fire crackled between them. Clara pulled the blanket tighter, trying to process what he'd just said. I'm still going to mess things up, she warned. Probably. And I'm never going to be graceful or small or any of the things I'm supposed to be. Good. Those things are useless out here anyway. Clara smiled despite herself. You're very strange. Coming from you, that's saying something. She laughed, and the sound surprised her. Genuine, unforced. When was the last time she'd laughed like that? Without checking to see who was watching, who was judging. I should try to sleep, she said, though she didn't move. Probably. Neither of them moved. They just sat there by the fire, not talking, until Clara's eyes finally grew heavy and Rowan walked her back to her room like it was the most natural thing in the world. She slept dreamlessly for the first time since her father had appeared. The days that followed carried a strange tension. Every morning, Clara woke expecting to see riders on the horizon. Every sound made her jump. Every cloud of dust in the distance sent her reaching for the rifle, but her father didn't return. He's not coming back, Rowan said after a week of this. You don't know that? I know men like him. They make threats when they're losing control. Usually don't follow through once they've had time to think about the cost. What cost? Admitting he cares enough to fight for you. That would require him to acknowledge you matter. Easier to just write you off and move on. The words should have hurt. Instead, they felt freeing. If her father wasn't coming back, then she really was done with that life. No going back, no second chances. Just forward, into whatever this new existence would become. She threw herself into work with renewed focus. Rowan had mentioned wanting to expand the chicken coop, so Clara started gathering materials, scrap wood from around the property, nails salvaged from old fencing. She had no idea how to build anything, but she figured she'd learn the same way she'd learned everything else, by failing until she didn't. The first attempt collapsed immediately. The second lasted almost a day before falling apart. The third held together long enough that Rowan came to inspect it. Structurally unsound, he said, tapping one of the support posts. I know. But you're getting the basic idea. Really? See how you angled this joint? That's good thinking. Just needs to be reinforced. He showed her how, hands moving with practiced efficiency. Try again. You'll get it. She did try again. And again. By the 8th attempt, she had something that resembled an actual coop. It wasn't pretty, crooked in places, the roof slightly lopsided, but it stood firm and kept the chickens contained. Good enough, Rowan said, which from him was high praise. Clara stood back and looked at the structure she'd built with her own hands. Nothing in her previous life had prepared her for the satisfaction of creating something functional, however imperfect. I built that, she said, mostly to herself. You did. It's ugly. It works. That's better than pretty. She glanced at him. Is it? Always. That night, one of the mules got spooked by something and kicked down part of the fence. Clara woke to the sound of Rowan cursing, rare enough to be startling, and was outside before she'd fully processed what was happening. The mule was running, fence posts scattered, chaos in the darkness. What do you need? She asked. Rowan was already moving, grabbing rope. Help me corner her. Left side, keep her from bolting toward the rocks. They worked in tandem, Clara moving on instinct more than knowledge. The mule was panicked, eyes rolling, but between them they managed to herd her into a corner where Rowan could get close enough to calm her down. Easy, he murmured, hands gentle on the mule's neck. Easy now. You're all right. It took 20 minutes to get the animal settled and secured. By then, both Clara and Rowan were covered in dust and breathing hard. What spooked her? Clara asked. Mountain lion, maybe. Or her own shadow? Mules get nervous. He checked the damage to the fence, grimaced. This'll take most of tomorrow to fix. I'll help. You don't have to. I know. I want to. Rowan looked at her in the darkness, his face half-shadowed. You did good just now. Stayed calm, moved when you needed to. I was terrified. Yeah, but you still moved. That's what counts. They worked on the fence the next day as promised, Clara holding posts while Rowan hammered, learning the rhythm of repair work. It was monotonous, physically demanding, and somehow satisfying in a way she couldn't explain. Why do you live out here? She asked as they worked. Really? Not just because you were running. Why stay? Rowan was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, out here things make sense. You work, you survive. You don't work, you don't. No politics, no social games, no pretending to be something you're not just to make other people comfortable. Sounds lonely. It was. Until it wasn't. Clara looked up. What changed? He drove another nail home before answering. You showed up. The simple honesty of it hit her sideways. I'm not exactly good company. You're honest company. That's rarer. I complain a lot. About real things, not nonsense. I'm not what anyone would choose, Clara. He set the hammer down, turned to face her fully. I'm going to say this once, and I need you to actually hear it. Your father was an idiot. Your mother was weak. Everyone back in Philadelphia who made you feel like you weren't enough was wrong. You are exactly what you're supposed to be, and the only reason they couldn't see that is because they were looking for the wrong thing. She couldn't speak, couldn't process the weight of what he'd just said. You think I kept you around out of pity or obligation? Rowan continued. I kept you around because you're useful, because you try, because you make this place better just by being in it, and if you can't see that yet, then you're still looking at yourself through their eyes instead of your own. Clara's vision blurred. I don't know how to see myself any other way. Then learn. Same way you learned everything else out here. Keep trying until it sticks. He picked up the hammer and went back to work, leaving Clara standing there with tears running down her face and something breaking open in her chest. It wasn't happiness exactly. It was bigger than that. Harder, like a fist that had been clenched for 23 years finally learning to open. She picked up another fence post and got back to work. 2 weeks after her father's visit, a stranger rode in. Just one man, older, with a badge pinned to his vest and an expression that suggested he'd seen too much and cared about very little. Clara's stomach dropped. The sheriff. Her father had actually done it. But Rowan didn't tense, didn't reach for his rifle. He just walked out to meet the man, casual and unhurried. Sheriff Carson, Rowan said. Been a while. Rowan. The sheriff dismounted, looked around the property. Got a complaint filed about you. Man named Whitmore claims you're holding his daughter against her will. His daughter's right there, Rowan gestured to Clara, who stood frozen on the porch. She can tell you herself. The sheriff walked over, tipping his hat politely. Miss Whitmore, I presume? Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. Your father says you were taken under duress. That true? No, sir. He says you're being held here, prevented from leaving. That's not true either. So you're here by choice. Clara took a breath. Yes, completely by choice. The sheriff studied her for a long moment, You look different than your father described. How did he describe me? Delicate. Sheltered. Incapable of making decisions for yourself. Clara almost laughed. I'm none of those things. I can see that. The sheriff glanced at Rowan. He mentioned a contract? Signed and witnessed, Rowan confirmed. Her father initiated it, traded her to settle a land dispute, all legal. And you're of age? The sheriff asked Clara. 23. Then legally, you can make your own decisions about where you live and who you associate with. He pulled out a small notebook, made some notes. I'll file my report stating I found you in good health, sound mind, and no evidence of coercion. Your father won't like it, but there's nothing more he can do. Relief flooded through Clara so suddenly she had to sit down. The sheriff tucked his notebook away. For what it's worth, miss, you look healthier than most society women I've met. Whatever you're doing out here seems to be working. Thank you, Clara managed. Rowan, the sheriff nodded to him. Keep out of trouble. Always do. That's a lie, but I appreciate the effort. The sheriff mounted up and rode off, leaving Clara and Rowan standing in the afternoon sun. It's over, Clara said, not quite believing it. He can't make me go back. No, he can't. I'm really free. You were always free. Now it's just official. Clara started laughing, and once she started, she couldn't stop. It was too much, the relief, the fear, the sheer absurdity of having her freedom legally confirmed by a man with a badge when she'd been claiming it in her heart for weeks. Rowan watched her laugh with something almost like amusement on his face. You done? Probably not. Fair enough. She sobered slightly, looking at him seriously. What happens now? What do you want to happen? I don't know. I've never gotten to decide that before. Well, Rowan said, you've got time to figure it out. Not like either of us is going anywhere. And that, Clara realized, was exactly right. She had time. Time to learn. Time to grow. Time to become whoever she was supposed to be without anyone telling her she was doing it wrong. The desert stretched out around them, vast and indifferent, and somehow perfect. Clara looked at it and smiled. The seasons changed slowly in the desert, marked less by falling leaves than by the angle of the sun and the temperature at dawn. Clara had been at the cabin for 4 months when the first real cold arrived, creeping in overnight and turning her breath visible in the morning air. She woke shivering, her thin blanket inadequate against the chill that had seeped through the walls. In Philadelphia, she would have rung for a servant to stoke the fire. Here, she got up and did it herself, her fingers clumsy with cold as she coaxed the embers back to life. Rowan was already outside checking on the animals. Clara pulled on her heaviest shirt, still not heavy enough, and joined him. Gonna need more firewood, he said without preamble. And we should check the roof. Cold like this means snow's coming. Snow? Out here? Mountains get it bad. We're low enough it might just be rain, but better to prepare. He glanced at her, taking in her inadequate clothing. You're going to freeze in that. I don't have anything warmer. I know. That's the problem. He finished with the chickens, straightened up. There's a trading post about half a day's ride. We'll go tomorrow, get you proper winter gear. Clara's stomach twisted. Both of us? You need to learn the route anyway. Can't have you stuck here if something happens to me. The casual way he mentioned his own potential absence made her chest tighten. What would happen to you? Anything? Accident? Sickness? Could get thrown from a horse and break my neck. Point is, you need to be able to get help if you're alone. It hadn't occurred to Clara that Rowan might not always be there, that this man who'd become her only constant in this strange new life was just as mortal as anyone else. I don't want to think about that, she said quietly. Thinking about it is how you survive it. He started walking back to the cabin. We leave at dawn. Dress warm as you can. That night, Clara lay awake listening to the wind rattle the shutters. Somewhere in the darkness, Rowan coughed, a deep, rattling sound that made her stomach drop. He'd been coughing on and off for days, always brushing it off when she asked. She got up, padded into the main room. Rowan was sitting by the fire, wrapped in a blanket, the cough shaking his frame. You're sick, Clara said. Just a cold. That's not just a cold. He looked at her with tired eyes. It's nothing I haven't dealt with before. That doesn't make it nothing. She moved closer, put her hand on his forehead before he could protest. Hot, definitely fevered. You need rest. Can't rest. Too much to do. The work will still be there tomorrow. You won't be any good to it if you collapse. Clara, don't. She sat down next to him, took the blanket from around his shoulders, and repositioned it more securely. You've spent 4 months teaching me how to survive out here. Let me return the favor. Go to bed. I'll keep the fire going. For a moment, she thought he'd argue. Then he nodded, too tired to fight, and let her help him to his bedroll. She brought him water, made him drink it, then settled by the fire to keep watch. The night stretched long. Clara fed the fire, checked on Rowan every hour, and tried not to think about what would happen if he got worse. Out here, doctors were scarce and far away. If something went really wrong, she couldn't finish the thought. By morning, Rowan's fever had broken, but he was weak, his face gray with exhaustion. Clara made him stay in bed, actually had to threaten to hide his boots to keep him there, while she handled the morning chores. Feeding the animals was familiar by now, collecting eggs, hauling water, all of it routine. But as she worked, she realized how much she'd come to depend on Rowan's presence. Not just for the work, but for the steadiness of him. The way he made survival seem possible just by existing. What would she do if he wasn't there? The question haunted her as she finished the chores and came back inside to find Rowan trying to get up. Absolutely not, she said firmly. The fence on the south side needs... The fence can wait. You're staying put. Clara, I'm fine. You're not. And I'm not letting you make yourself worse out of stubbornness. She pointed at the bedroll. Lie down. Something in her tone must have convinced him, because he actually obeyed. Clara brought him more water, some of the jerky he'd taught her to make, and sat down nearby. This is backwards, Rowan muttered. What is? Me being the useless one. You're not useless. You're sick. There's a difference. Feels the same. Clara understood that better than he knew. You know what you told me when I first got here? When I couldn't do anything right and kept failing at everything? What? You said I wasn't useless. That I was learning, that trying counted for something. She met his eyes. Same applies to you. You're not useless just because you need help for once. Rowan looked at her for a long moment. When did you get so smart? I had a good teacher. He almost smiled, then started coughing again. Clara waited it out, handed him water, tried not to show how worried she was. The trading post, he said when he could speak again. You still need winter clothes. We'll go when you're better. Could be weeks. Then it'll be weeks. I'm not leaving you like this. You might have to. If this gets worse, it won't. But if it does, you need to know the route, just in case. He pushed himself up despite her protests, grabbed a scrap of paper and a pencil stub. Listen, follow the creek north until you hit the split. Take the left fork. You'll see a red rock formation. Looks like a tower. Turn east there. The trading post is maybe 3 miles past that. Clara memorized the directions, even though everything in her rebelled against the idea of leaving him. I'm not going without you. You will if you have to. Promise me. Rowan, promise. She looked at his fevered eyes, the stubborn set of his jaw even weakened by illness, and realized this was important to him. Not just practical, but something deeper. He needed to know she could survive without him. I promise, she said quietly, but I won't have to, because you're going to be fine. You don't know that. Yes, I do. You're too stubborn to die. That got a real smile out of him. Brief, but genuine. Learn from the best. He lay back down, exhaustion claiming him quickly. Clara stayed nearby, keeping the fire going, checking his fever, and trying not to think about how empty this place would feel without him in it. 3 days passed. Rowan's fever came and went, never quite breaking but never getting bad enough to panic over. Clara managed the property as best she could, doing the work of 2 people and feeling it in every muscle. On the 4th morning, she woke to find Rowan up and moving around, still pale but functional. You should be resting, she said. I've rested enough. Any longer and I'll go crazy. He looked around the cabin, taking in the stacked firewood, the swept floor, the organized supplies. You kept everything running. Barely. You did it. That's what matters. He pulled on his coat. We're going to the trading post today. You need proper clothes before it gets colder, and I need to move around before I forget how. Are you sure you're strong enough? No, but I'm sure enough. He handed her the coat he'd bought her months ago. Come on, daylight's wasting. They rode out together, Clara on the mule she'd learned to trust, Rowan on his horse moving slower than usual, but moving. The desert was beautiful in the cold morning light, all harsh angles and long shadows. Clara found herself memorizing the route like Rowan had taught her, the creek, the split, the red rock formation. each landmark a promise that she could find her way back if she had to. The trading post was bigger than she expected. A rambling building with additions that didn't quite match, surrounded by corrals and storage sheds. People moved around outside, more humans in one place than Clara had seen in months. She felt suddenly self-conscious. These were frontier people, hardened and practical, and she was still learning how to belong in their world. "Stay close," Rowan said quietly, like he sensed her nervousness. "Most folks here are decent, but decent doesn't mean friendly." They dismounted and went inside. The trading post was dim and crowded, filled with everything from basic supplies to luxury items that seemed absurdly out of place. A woman stood behind the counter, maybe 50, with sharp eyes and sharper cheekbones. "Rowan Hale," she said, not quite smiling. "Haven't seen you in months. Thought maybe you'd finally died out there." "Not yet, Martha." "And who's this?" Martha's gaze landed on Clara, assessing and not entirely kind. "Your mail-order bride finally arrive?" "Business associate," Rowan said flatly. "She needs winter gear, good quality, not the cheap stuff you try to pass off on newcomers." Martha's eyebrows rose. "Business associate. That's a new one." She came around the counter, circling Clara like she was livestock. "You're bigger than most women who come through here." The words hit like a slap. Clara felt all her old shame rising, that familiar urge to apologize for taking up space. "Good thing I'm not most women, then," she heard herself say. Martha paused, something like respect flickering across her face. "Fair enough. This way." She led them to a corner stacked with clothing. Clara tried on coats until they found one that fit. Thick wool, slightly worn, but warm. Martha threw in gloves, a hat, and an extra shirt without being asked. "You'll need these too," she said, tossing Clara a pair of sturdy boots. "Those things you're wearing won't last through winter." Clara looked at the pile of gear, then at Rowan. "I can't pay for all this." "I can," Rowan said. "You already—" "Clara, just accept it." Martha was watching them with unconcealed interest. "So you really are just business associates?" "Is there a reason that's hard to believe?" Rowan asked. "Most men who bring women out here are either married to them or planning to be." "Well, I'm neither." "Shame. You could use someone to keep you alive. You look half dead already." "I'm fine." "You're not, but that's your business." Martha tallied up the supplies, accepted Rowan's payment, then fixed Clara with another sharp look. "You know what you're doing out there, girl. Learning as I go. That's how most people die in the desert. Then I guess I'll have to be lucky." Martha snorted. "Lucky. Right." But she threw in an extra pair of socks as they left. "Don't be a stranger, Rowan, and you—" She pointed at Clara. "Don't let him work himself to death. He's too stubborn to stop on his own." Outside, Clara strapped her new purchases to the mule, while Rowan handled some additional business. She was adjusting the saddle when a man approached. Younger than Rowan, well-dressed by frontier standards, with the kind of easy confidence that came from never being told no. "You're new around here," he said, looking Clara up and down in a way that made her skin crawl. "Just passing through." "With Rowan Hale. Interesting choice." "Not your concern." "Maybe not. But a woman like you could do better than shacking up with a hermit in the middle of nowhere." Clara felt anger flash through her. "A woman like me? You know, someone who'd appreciate comfort, civilization, the things Rowan can't offer out in that shack he calls home." "His home is just fine." "Is it? Or are you just telling yourself that because you don't have better options?" The man stepped closer. "I'm Samuel Garrett. I own the biggest ranch in 3 territories. You could have a real house, servants, everything you're used to." "I'm not used to anything," Clara interrupted, "and I'm not interested." "Don't be hasty. At least think about—" She said, "No, Samuel." Rowan's voice cut through the conversation like a knife. He'd appeared from somewhere, moving silent despite his lingering illness, and now stood between Clara and Samuel with an expression that promised violence. Samuel raised his hands in mock surrender. "Just making conversation. Make it somewhere else. You can't keep her locked up forever, Hale. Eventually she'll realize what she's missing. The only thing she's missing is you bothering her. Move along." For a moment, tension crackled between them. Then Samuel shrugged and walked away, throwing one last look at Clara that made her want to shower. "Friend of yours?" Clara asked when he was gone. "Opposite. He's tried to buy my land 6 times. Thinks everything has a price. Including people, apparently. Yeah, that's why I can't stand him. Rowan checked the mule's straps, making sure everything was secure. You handled that well. I wanted to hit him. That would have been well, too. They mounted up and started the ride home. Clara was quiet, processing the encounter, the way Samuel had looked at her like she was a thing to be acquired. It reminded her too much of her father's attitude, that assumption that women existed to be traded and managed. Does that happen often? She asked. Men like that? Often enough. Frontier attracts all types. Some are running from something, some are looking for something, some just want to be somewhere they can do what they want without consequences. Which one are you? Rowan considered this. All three, maybe, or none. Haven't decided yet. They rode in comfortable silence after that, the desert vast around them. Clara felt the weight of her new coat, warm and solid, and thought about how different she felt from the woman who'd arrived 4 months ago in a silk dress and ruined shoes. That woman would have been flattered by Samuel's attention, desperate for it even, proof that someone found her desirable despite her size. This version of Clara just found him pathetic. They were an hour from home when Rowan suddenly tensed, pulling his horse to a stop. Clara halted beside him. What is it? Smoke. From the wrong direction. Clara looked where he was pointing and saw it, a thin line of gray against the sky, coming from somewhere near their property. Could be nothing, Rowan said, but his voice suggested he didn't believe it. They rode faster. The smoke grew thicker as they approached, and Clara's heart started hammering against her ribs. If the cabin was burning, everything they had would be gone. All their supplies, all their work, everything. But when they crested the final hill, the cabin stood intact. The smoke was coming from beyond it, from the area where they kept the mules. Rowan was off his horse before it fully stopped, running toward the smoke with Clara close behind. They found the source quickly. Someone had set fire to the hay storage, and it was burning fast in the dry air. Get water! Rowan shouted, already grabbing buckets. Clara ran to the well, hauling water as fast as she could while Rowan worked to contain the blaze. They threw bucket after bucket onto the flames, working in desperate tandem, ash stinging their eyes and smoke choking their lungs. It took an hour to get the fire under control. By then, half their winter hay was gone, and both of them were covered in soot and sweat. Rowan stood staring at the smoldering remains, his jaw tight with anger. This wasn't an accident, he said. How do you know? He pointed to marks on the ground, boot prints, too many to be just theirs. Someone was here. Multiple people. They waited until we left and did this deliberately. Clara felt ice settle in her stomach. Why? Could be Samuel, angry about being told no. Could be someone else with a grudge. Doesn't matter much. The result's the same. Someone sending a message. What message? That we're vulnerable. That they can get to us. He kicked at a piece of charred wood. And they're right. We are. Clara looked at the destroyed hay, thinking about the mules that depended on it, the winter that was coming, the precarious balance of survival they maintained out here. What do we do? We adapt. Figure out how to make the remaining hay last. Maybe buy more at the trading post, though that'll cost. Rowan rubbed his face, exhaustion and illness catching up with him. And we watch, more carefully than before. That night, they took turns keeping watch. Clara sat by the window with the rifle, staring out at darkness that suddenly felt full of threats. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow could be an intruder. Rowan's cough had worsened from the smoke and exertion. She heard him struggling to breathe in the other room, stubborn even in his illness, refusing to admit how bad he felt. Near midnight, Clara heard footsteps outside. She raised the rifle, heart pounding, finger on the trigger. It's me, Rowan's voice came from the darkness. He'd gone out to check the perimeter without telling her. You scared me half to death. Sorry, couldn't sleep, figured I'd make sure everything was secure. He came inside, and in the firelight she saw how rough he looked, fevered again, sweat on his face despite the cold. You need rest, she said. I need to keep us safe. You can't do that if you collapse. Clara set the rifle down, went to him. Please, just for tonight, trust me to keep watch. You've taught me enough. I can handle it. Rowan looked like he wanted to argue. Then another coughing fit shook him, and he nodded reluctantly. Wake me if anything happens. I will. He went to bed, and Clara returned to her post by the window. The night stretched long and cold, every hour marked by Rowan's labored breathing from the other room. She thought about Samuel's offer. A real house, servants, comfort, everything her old life had prepared her for, and she felt nothing but contempt for it. This was real, this hard chair, this rifle in her hands, this responsibility to protect what mattered. The fear was real, and the exhaustion, and the uncertainty about whether they'd survive the winter. But it was honest. No pretending, no performing, no trying to be something she wasn't just to make other people comfortable. Dawn came slowly, pale light creeping across the desert. Clara heard Rowan stirring, getting up despite needing more rest. "Anything happen?" he asked, coming into the main room. "Nothing. Quiet all night." He nodded, looking relieved and maybe a little surprised that she'd actually managed it. "Good. Thank you. You taught me well." "I taught you basics. You did the rest yourself." He moved to make coffee, winced at the pain in his chest. "We need to talk about winter." "What about it?" "With half the hay gone, we can't feed all the animals. We'll have to sell some. Probably 2 of the mules." Clara's chest tightened. She'd grown attached to those mules, learned their personalities, fed them every morning. "Can't we buy more hay?" "Not enough money. Not after the supplies we just got." He poured coffee with shaking hands. "It's either sell the animals or watch them starve. Those are the options." "I hate those options." "Yeah, me too." They sat in silence, drinking bad coffee and facing hard reality. This was survival, making impossible choices, losing things you cared about, adapting, or dying. "When do we have to decide?" Clara asked. "Soon, before the cold gets worse." Rowan looked at her over his cup. "Unless you've got a better idea." Clara thought about everything she'd learned, everything she'd survived, everything she'd become in 4 months of frontier living. "What if we didn't just survive winter?" she said slowly. "What if we did better than that?" "What do you mean?" "Martha said you could use someone to keep you alive. Samuel said I could do better than this place. Everyone seems to think we're barely hanging on out here." Clara set her cup down. "What if we prove them wrong?" "How?" "I don't know yet, but there has to be a way. Some way to make this place actually thrive instead of just scraping by." Rowan studied her with something like admiration. "You're serious?" "Completely. I didn't survive my father throwing me away and 4 months of learning to not quit just to watch everything fall apart because someone burned our hay. It's not that simple. Nothing out here is simple, but that hasn't stopped us yet." A slow smile spread across Rowan's face, the first real one she'd seen in days. "All right, let's figure it out, together." And sitting there in that small cabin with winter coming and enemies unknown and everything uncertain, Clara felt something she'd never felt in her entire pampered life in Philadelphia. She felt powerful. The idea came to Clara while she was hauling water 3 days later, her arms burning and her mind wandering to escape the monotony. She'd noticed something during their trip to the trading post. Martha had shelves full of preserves, dried goods, things people needed but couldn't always make themselves. And she charged premium prices for them. Clara set down the bucket and stared at the garden plot Rowan had mentioned wanting to expand but never had time for. The soil was decent here, better than most of the surrounding desert. With the creek nearby, they had water. And Clara had something most frontier people didn't. She'd grown up watching her mother's cook preserve everything from jellies to pickled vegetables. She'd thought those skills were useless out here. Maybe she'd been wrong. When Rowan came back from checking the fences, Clara was waiting with a plan half-formed and completely crazy. "I want to start a garden," she said. He blinked. "What?" "A real one. Big enough to sell produce at the trading post. Martha charges ridiculous prices for vegetables because nobody grows them out here. What if we did?" Rowan wiped sweat from his face, considering. "Ground's decent, but it's a lot of work. And we'd need seeds, tools." "We have some tools. We could trade for seeds. And I know how to preserve things, make them last through winter. We could sell fresh in summer, preserved goods year-round. You know how to do that? My mother's cook taught me. I spent half my childhood in the kitchen because nobody wanted me in the parlor." Clara felt heat in her cheeks. "I thought it was punishment then. Maybe it was preparation." Rowan looked at the garden plot, then back at her. "It's risky. If the crop fails, then we're no worse off than now. But if it works, we could actually make money instead of just surviving." She could see him calculating, weighing possibilities against risks. Finally, he nodded. "All right, we try it. But we start small. Can't afford to bet everything on something untested." Clara felt triumph surge through her. "When do we start?" "After we deal with the immediate problem. We still need to sell those mules, get enough money to make it through winter. Garden's a spring project. Reality settled back over her excitement. He was right. They couldn't plant anything now, not with winter coming. But the idea took root in her mind anyway, growing wild with possibilities. The next week, they rode to Samuel Garrett's ranch to sell 2 of their mules. Clara hated every minute of it. Hated going to him after he'd propositioned her, hated that they needed his money, hated the smug satisfaction on his face when they arrived. "Rowan Hale," Samuel said, coming out of his impressive ranch house with that easy confidence Clara had learned to despise. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Need to sell 2 mules, what?" Rowan said flatly. "Heard you're buying." "I might be. Depends on the quality." Samuel's eyes slid to Clara. "And what you're willing to accept in trade." The implication was clear. Clara felt her hands curl into fists. "Cash only," Rowan said, his voice dropping into a dangerous register. "And if you say one more thing to her, we're leaving." Samuel raised his hands in mock apology. "Just business, Hale. No need to get protective." He walked over to examine the mules, running his hands over them with proprietary confidence. "They're decent. I'll give you $40 for both." "They're worth $75. "To someone desperate, maybe, but I'm not desperate." Samuel smiled. "40. Take it or leave it." Clara saw Rowan's jaw tighten. They both knew 40 wasn't enough, wasn't close to enough, but options were limited and Samuel knew it. 60, Clara said suddenly. Both men turned to look at her. "These are the best trained mules in 3 territories. They can handle any terrain, never spook, and they're young enough to work for years. 40 is insulting." Samuel's eyebrows rose. "Big talk from someone who didn't know how to ride 4 months ago. 4 months ago, I didn't know a lot of things. Now I do. Including when someone's trying to cheat me." Clara met his eyes steadily. 60, or we sell them to the Marshall brothers. They mentioned needing pack animals when we saw them last week." It was a bluff. She'd never met the Marshall brothers, but Samuel didn't know that. He studied her for a long moment, something like respect flickering across his face. 55. Final offer. Clara looked at Rowan. He gave a tiny nod. "Done," she said. Samuel counted out the money, handed it to Rowan, then looked at Clara again. "You're wasted out there with him, you know. Someone with your spine could do real well in civilization." "I am doing real well, just not the way you'd recognize." They left with the money and one less problem, but Clara felt dirty the whole ride home, like she'd compromised something important by doing business with Samuel. "You did good back there," Rowan said as they rode. "I hated it." "I know, but you still did it. That takes guts. Or stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing." He glanced at her. "Where'd you learn to negotiate like that?" "I didn't. I just knew he was lying about the price and got angry." Rowan smiled. "Anger works, especially when you're right." The money from the mules helped, but it didn't solve everything. Winter arrived in earnest 2 weeks later, bringing cold that cut through their clothes and occasional snow that turned the desert white and alien. Clara had never experienced cold like this, the kind that made your bones ache and your breath freeze. They spent most days inside, working on small projects. Rowan taught Clara to repair leather, to carve basic tools, to do the 100 small tasks that kept a frontier home running. She taught him nothing, because what did she know that he didn't? But one evening, Rowan cut his hand badly while working on a harness. The knife slipped, sliced deep across his palm, and blood poured out faster than seemed possible. Clara moved without thinking. She grabbed clean cloth, pressed it to the wound, elevated his hand while barking instructions she didn't know she remembered. "Hold this. Press hard. Don't look at it if you're squeamish." "I'm not squeamish," Rowan said, but his face was pale. Clara boiled water, found the needle and thread Rowan kept for emergencies, and sterilized both. Her hand shook. She'd never done this before. Had only watched the family doctor stitch up her brother once after a riding accident. "This is going to hurt," she warned. "Everything hurts. Just do it." She did. The first stitch was clumsy, the second better. By the 5th, she'd found a rhythm. Rowan sat stone still, breathing carefully through his nose, while Clara worked. When she finished, she wrapped his hand in clean cloth and sat back, her own hands trembling with delayed fear. "Where'd you learn that?" Rowan asked. "I didn't. I just remembered watching someone else do it." "Well, you did good. Real good." He flexed his fingers carefully. "Might have saved me from losing some function in this hand. You would have done it yourself if I wasn't here." "Badly. and with my offhand, this was better. Clara looked at the needle and thread, blood-stained and horrible, and felt something shift inside her. She'd done that. Taken something broken and fixed it, even imperfectly. Maybe she had skills that mattered out here after all. The injury slowed Rowan down, made him clumsy with one hand bandaged. Clara picked up the slack without being asked, doing the work that required two good hands. She was splitting wood one afternoon, still not great at it, but functional, when she heard horses approaching. Multiple horses. Again. Her stomach dropped. She grabbed the rifle and ran for the cabin, bursting through the door to find Rowan already up and armed despite his injury. "How many?" he asked. "Couldn't tell. At least 3. They took positions, Rowan at the door, Clara at the window, and waited. The riders that appeared weren't her father's men or Samuel's ranch hands. They were strangers, rough-looking, with the kind of hard eyes that suggested they'd survived things most people didn't. The leader dismounted slowly, hands visible and empty. "We're not looking for trouble," he called out. "Just heard there might be someone here who could help with a medical problem." Rowan didn't lower his rifle. "Who told you that?" "Martha at the trading post. Said a woman here stitched up a bad cut recently. We've got a man with a bullet wound. Doctor's too far and he's not going to make it that long." Clara looked at Rowan. He looked back, the question clear in his eyes. "Your choice." She thought about the stitching she'd done, how clumsy it had been, how much luck had been involved. Thought about these strangers who could be lying, could be dangerous, could be anything. Then she thought about a man dying because she was too scared to try. "Bring him in," she said. Rowan's expression didn't change, but she saw the tension in his shoulders. He didn't like this, but he lowered the rifle slightly and stepped aside. They carried the injured man in on a makeshift stretcher. He was young, maybe 20, and the bullet wound in his shoulder was infected and ugly. Clara's stomach turned at the sight of it. "I'm not a doctor," she said immediately. "We know, but you're what we've got." The leader, his name was Jackson, he said, looked at her with desperate eyes. "Please, he's my brother." Clara made them put him on the table. She boiled water, gathered clean cloth, and tried to remember everything she'd ever heard about treating wounds. The bullet was still in there. She could see the dark shape of it under the inflamed skin. "This is going to be bad," she told Rowan quietly. "I don't know if I can do this." "You can. Same way you did mine, just bigger." "What if I kill him? What if you save him?" Clara took a shaky breath and got to work. She cleaned the wound as best she could, then sterilized her knife. The young man was barely conscious, fever bright and mumbling. "Hold him still," she told Jackson. Digging out the bullet was the worst thing Clara had ever done. The man screamed despite being half unconscious, thrashing against the hands holding him down. Blood everywhere, the smell of infection making her gag, her own hand shaking so badly she could barely grip the knife. But she got it out. The bullet came free with a wet sound that would haunt her nightmares, and she dropped it in a bowl before packing the wound with clean cloth. "He needs real medical attention," she said, washing her shaking hands. "This is just buying time." "It's more time than he had before," Jackson said, looking at his brother with naked relief. "Thank you." They stayed overnight, sleeping in their bedrolls outside despite the cold. Clara checked on the wounded man every few hours, changing his bandages, monitoring for signs of fever. By morning, he looked marginally better. Not good, but alive. Jackson tried to pay her when they left. Clara refused. "Just tell people where you got help," she said. "If you want to repay me, spread the word that we're here." After they left, Clara scrubbed the blood from the table and tried to stop shaking. Rowan found her sitting on the floor, arms wrapped around her knees. "You all right?" he asked. "I don't know. I might have killed him. The infection might get worse. The wound might... You might have saved his life. That's what happened in this moment. The rest isn't your fault." "How do you know?" "Because you did everything you could. That's all anyone can do." Clara looked up at him. "Is it always like this? That awful? Saving people?" "Yeah. Usually." He sat down next to her. "That's why most people don't do it. Easier to look away." "I couldn't look away." "I know. That's one of the things I..." He stopped, seemed to reconsider his words. "That's one of your strengths." Clara wondered what he'd been about to say instead, but she didn't ask. Word spread faster than Clara expected. Within 2 weeks, 3 more people showed up needing medical help. A child with a badly burned hand, a woman with an infected tooth, a man who'd broken his arm and had it set wrong. Clara helped them all, learning as she went, making mistakes, but somehow keeping people alive. Rowan started calling her Doc as a joke. It didn't feel like a joke after a while, it felt like an identity. The winter people brought payment, chickens, supplies, once a beautiful set of preserving jars that made Clara's heart race thinking about the garden she'd plant in spring. They also brought stories, news from the wider world, connections to a community Clara hadn't known existed out here. "You're building something," Rowan said one night as they tallied up the supplies they'd received. "What do you mean?" "A reputation, a network. People know about you now, know they can come here for help. Is that good or bad?" "Depends. Good if we want to be part of the community, bad if we want to stay isolated." Clara thought about it. "What do you want?" "Doesn't matter what I want. This is your thing, your choice." "It matters to me." Rowan was quiet for a long moment. "I came out here to be alone, to get away from people and all the complications they bring, and that worked for a while, but then you showed up and..." He trailed off. "I don't know. It's different now. Better, maybe, less empty. So you don't mind people knowing where we are?" "I mind, but I don't hate it as much as I thought I would." He looked at her directly. "You're changing this place. Changing me, maybe. Making it feel less like hiding and more like living." The words settled around them, heavy with meaning Clara wasn't quite ready to examine. She changed the subject and Rowan let her, but something had shifted between them. Some acknowledgement that this partnership was becoming something neither of them had planned for. Winter deepened. Clara's medical work continued. Some days nobody came, other weeks she saw multiple patients. She got better at it, more confident, though the fear never fully went away. And then one frozen morning, a woman arrived alone, heavily pregnant and in obvious distress. "My husband's getting the doctor," she gasped. "But the baby's coming now and I don't know what to..." Clara's mind went blank with terror. She'd helped with injuries, infections, simple ailments, but childbirth? That was beyond anything she knew. "I can't," she said. "I don't know how. Please." The woman grabbed her arm, tears streaming. "There's nobody else, please." Clara looked at Rowan desperately. He looked back, and she saw in his eyes that he had no answers either. "All right," Clara heard herself say. "All right. Come inside." She'd never felt more unqualified for anything in her life. The woman, her name was Sarah, was in active labor, the baby coming whether anyone knew what they were doing or not. Clara did what she could. Boiled water, got clean cloths, tried to remember anything she'd ever heard about childbirth from hushed conversations between married women. It was brutal. Sarah screamed and Clara felt helpless, useless, terrified she was watching someone die and couldn't stop it. Rowan stayed nearby, doing whatever Clara asked, even though he looked green. Hours passed. Clara's back ached from supporting Sarah. Her hands cramped from holding, pressing, helping however she could. And then suddenly there was a baby. Small, purple, not breathing. Clara's heart stopped. She'd killed them both. She'd failed. The baby coughed, drew breath, started crying. Clara almost collapsed with relief. She cleaned the baby with shaking hands, wrapped her in soft cloth, and placed her in Sarah's arms. "It's a girl," Clara said through tears. "You have a daughter." Sarah was crying too, holding her baby and looking at Clara like she'd performed a miracle instead of barely surviving the experience. "Thank you," Sarah whispered. "Thank you. Thank you. I didn't do anything. You did all the work. You were here. You didn't leave me alone. That's everything." The doctor arrived an hour later, checked both mother and baby, and declared them healthy. He looked at Clara with professional assessment. "You've done this before?" "Never." "You have steady hands and good instincts. Ever consider formal training?" Clara laughed, slightly hysterical. "I can't even read medical texts. I just do what seems right. That's most of medicine anyway. The rest is luck and stubbornness." After they left, Clara sat on the porch despite the cold, staring at nothing. Rowan brought her coffee and sat down beside her. "You did good in there." "I was terrified." "Yeah, but you still did it. That's what counts." "I don't want to do it again. Ever." "You might not have a choice. Word's going to spread about this." He was right. By the end of the week, 3 more pregnant women had visited, asking if Clara would help when their time came. She said yes each time, hating herself for it, knowing she couldn't say no. "I'm not a midwife," she told Rowan in frustration. "I don't know what I'm doing." "You're learning, same as everything else." "People could die while I'm learning. People could die without you trying." He caught her eye. You think you're not qualified? Nobody out here is qualified for what they do. They just do it anyway because the alternative is worse. Clara wrapped her arms around herself. What if I fail? Then you fail. But you fail trying to help, which is better than failing because you were too scared to try. She wanted to argue, to explain all the ways this could go wrong. But she'd already said yes to those women, and Rowan was right. Out here, trying was the only option. Spring came slowly, announced by subtle changes, warmer days, green shoots pushing through the earth, birds returning. Clara started her garden with seeds traded from Martha and advice from Sarah, who'd become a frequent visitor. Rowan helped when his hand allowed, but mostly he watched Clara work with something like pride in his expression. You were right about this, he said one afternoon as Clara planted tomato seeds with more hope than expertise. About what? About not just surviving, about making this place into something more. Clara sat back on her heels, looking at the neat rows she'd created. We haven't grown anything yet. No, but you've grown something else. A practice. A purpose. People come here now because they know we'll help. You mean they come because I'll help? You just tolerate them. I do more than tolerate them now. They're starting to feel like, he searched for the word, like they belong here, like we're building something bigger than just the two of us. Clara felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the spring sun. Is that what we're doing? Building something? I think so, though I'm still figuring out exactly what. They worked in comfortable silence after that, Clara planting and Rowan repairing the fence she'd built months ago to keep rabbits out. The desert stretched around them, still harsh but familiar now. Home. Clara was checking the first shoots of growth a week later when riders appeared on the horizon. Multiple riders, moving fast. Her first thought was trouble. It always was now. But as they got closer, she recognized Jackson, the man whose brother she'd saved. He had 3 others with him, all looking grim. What's wrong? Clara asked when they arrived. We need your help, Jackson said without preamble. There's been an accident at the Morrison Ranch. Multiple injuries, real bad ones. Their place is 2 hours from here. Will you come? Clara's stomach dropped. Going somewhere else, leaving the safety of her property, treating multiple serious injuries. Yes, she said before fear could stop her. Give me 10 minutes. She gathered her supplies, bandages, needle and thread, the few medicines she'd accumulated. Rowan was already saddling her mule. I'm coming with you, he said. Your hand is healed enough. You're not going alone. They rode hard, the mules pushing their limits. Clara's mind raced with possibilities, each worse than the last. What if she couldn't help? What if people died because she wasn't good enough, fast enough, knowledgeable enough? The Morrison Ranch was chaos when they arrived. A barn had partially collapsed, trapping workers underneath. Clara counted 5 injured people, 2 of them unconscious. She took a breath, pushed down her terror, and went to work. The next 6 hours were a blur of blood and pain and desperate improvisation. Clara moved from person to person, prioritizing by severity, doing whatever she could. Rowan helped, following her instructions without question, his steady presence keeping her grounded. 1 man died despite her best efforts. She felt it like a punch to the gut, the moment when breath stopped and there was nothing more she could do. But the others lived. Broken bones set, wounds stitched, bleeding stopped. By the time the doctor arrived from 3 territories over, Clara had stabilized everyone who could be stabilized. The doctor surveyed her work with professional eyes. You did well. Saved at least 2 lives here, maybe 3. I lost 1. You lost 1 out of 5 catastrophic injuries with no formal training and basic supplies. That's remarkable, not shameful. But Clara couldn't shake the feeling of failure, the weight of that 1 lost life. They rode home in darkness, exhausted and covered in other people's blood. Rowan didn't try to comfort her with empty words. He just rode beside her, solid and present. I'm sorry, he said finally. For what? For what you had to see today. What you had to do. It's part of this now, part of what I chose. Doesn't make it easier. No, Clara agreed. It doesn't. Back at the cabin, she scrubbed herself raw, trying to wash away the day. When she finally came out, Rowan had made food she couldn't eat and coffee she drank anyway. You know what you've become? He asked. What? Essential. People depend on you now. This whole area, you're the closest thing they have to real medical help. I'm not qualified. Oh, you're what they've got, and you're good at it.
Better than you think. He set down his coffee. The question is whether you can live with what that means, with days like today. Claire thought about the man who'd died, about his family's grief, about the weight of responsibility she'd never asked for but somehow claimed anyway. I don't know if I can, she admitted. Fair enough, but I think you will anyway, because that's who you are. Someone who shows up even when it's hard.
She looked at him across the table, this man who'd bought her for a land dispute and somehow become the person who saw her most clearly. When did you figure that out about me? Day 3. You walked with your feet bleeding and didn't complain once. I knew then you'd be trouble. Trouble? The good kind. Kind that changes things. He stood up. Get some sleep. Tomorrow you'll have people showing up to check on their gardens, or their pregnancies, or whatever else they need from you. You'll need rest for that. He was right. Clara went to bed exhausted and woke to find 2 women waiting outside, one pregnant and one with a sick child. She helped them both, and the next person, and the next. Her garden grew, her reputation grew. The isolated cabin that had been Rowan's escape became a hub, a place people came for help and hope. And somewhere in all of it, Clara realized she'd stopped thinking about Philadelphia entirely, stopped measuring herself against the woman she used to be, and started becoming someone new, someone who mattered. Not because of who her father was or what dress size she wore, but because of what she could do with her own 2 hands. That night, planting the last of her spring seeds, she said to Rowan, I think I'm happy. He looked up from the fence he was mending. Yeah? Yeah, is that strange? Why would it be strange? Because I'm in the middle of nowhere, doing work I was never trained for, living harder than I ever imagined. But I'm happy anyway. Rowan smiled. That's not strange. That's just life done right. And Clara, her hands dirty and her body tired and her future completely uncertain, believed him. Summer arrived with a vengeance, turning the desert into something that shimmered and breathed heat. Clara's garden exploded with growth, tomatoes, beans, squash, carrots, more than she'd dared hope for. She spent mornings harvesting and afternoons preserving, filling the jars she'd been given with pickles and jams that would sell at the trading post come fall. The medical work continued, too. A steady stream of people who'd heard about the woman who could stitch wounds and deliver babies and somehow keep people alive against odds. Clara stopped protesting that she wasn't qualified. The results spoke louder than her doubts, but success brought complications. Samuel Garrett showed up on a blazing afternoon in late June, riding alone this time, his expression harder than usual. We need to talk, he said without preamble. Rowan stepped out of the cabin, rifle in hand but lowered. About what? About the fact that half my ranch hands are riding 2 hours to see her. He jerked his chin at Clara. Instead of going to the doctor in Silverton like reasonable people. Clara set down the tomatoes she'd been sorting. I can't control who comes here. You could stop treating them. Send them to proper medical professionals. The doctor in Silverton is 3 days' ride. People come here because I'm close and I don't charge them money they don't have. Exactly. You're undercutting legitimate business. It's not fair competition. Rowan laughed, sharp and humorless. Since when do you care about fair competition? You've been trying to buy out every small ranch in this territory for years. That's different. That's business. So is this? Samuel's face darkened. You're getting too big for your britches, Hale, both of you. People are starting to talk about this place like it matters, like you're building something that could challenge the established order. We're not challenging anything, Clara said. We're just helping people who need help. That is challenging the established order. The doctor, the merchants, people like me who keep this territory running, we have a system. You're disrupting it. Then maybe your system needed disrupting. The words hung in the hot air. Samuel stared at Clara like he was seeing her for the first time. You've changed, he said finally. When I first met you, you were timid, scared. Now you talk back like you think you matter. I do matter. That's what I learned out here. You matter because he, Samuel pointed at Rowan, hasn't gotten tired of you yet. The minute he does, you'll be right back where you started, alone and worthless. Clara felt the old shame try to rise, that familiar voice saying Samuel was right. She was temporary. She was fooling herself, thinking she'd become someone new. Then she looked at her garden, at the jars of preserves waiting to be sold, at her hands calloused from work that meant something. She thought about the babies she'd delivered, the wounds she'd closed, the lives she'd helped save. You're wrong, she said quietly. I matter because I make myself matter, because I do work that needs doing, and whether Rowan gets tired of me or not doesn't change that. Rowan glanced at her,
something fierce and proud in his expression. I'm not getting tired of her, just so we're clear on that. Samuel's jaw tightened. This isn't over. You're making enemies, both of you, powerful ones. We've survived everything else thrown at us, Rowan said. We'll survive that too. After Samuel left, Clara sat on the porch steps, her hands shaking with delayed adrenaline. He's right about one thing, she said. We are making enemies. Yeah, we are. Doesn't that worry you? Rowan sat down beside her. It would worry me more if we were making enemies by doing nothing. At least this way we're making them by doing something worth defending. Is it worth it, really? You saved 3 lives last week. You're feeding people with that garden. You've made this place into something that matters to dozens of families. He looked at her directly. So yeah, I'd say it's worth it. Clara wanted to believe him, but Samuel's words echoed in her mind, especially the part about Rowan getting tired of her. Because what happened when he did? She'd built her entire new life around this partnership, this place. If it fell apart... Stop, Rowan said. Stop what? Whatever you're thinking. I can see it in your face. You're spiraling. I'm not... You are. And whatever you're worried about, it's probably wrong. He stood up, offered his hand. Come on, let's check the northern fence. Needs repairs, and the work will get you out of your head. He was right. The physical work did help. The familiar rhythm of walking the fence line and fixing breaks. They worked in comfortable silence until they reached the far corner of the property, where the view opened up to show the desert stretching endlessly. You know what I think about sometimes, Rowan said, setting down his tools. What? About the day your father brought you here, how angry I was, how I almost said no to the whole thing just because I didn't want to deal with the complication. Clara's chest tightened. You never told me that. Didn't seem relevant before, but looking back, if I'd said no that day, none of this would exist. The garden, the medical practice, the community we're building. It all started because I said yes to something I didn't want. Is there a point to this story? The point is that the best things in life usually start as things we don't want. Things that seem too hard or too complicated or too risky. But we do them anyway, and they change us. Change everything. Clara looked at the desert, thinking about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, frightened, ashamed, convinced she was worthless. That woman felt like a stranger now. I don't know who I am anymore, she admitted. You're Clara Hale. She blinked. What? That's what people call you, Doc Hale. I hear it at the trading post in conversations. They don't know you were Clara Whitmore. They just know you as my partner, so they assume... He stopped, looking uncomfortable. I can correct them if you want. Tell them it's not like that. But Claire's mind had snagged on one word. Partner? Well, yeah, that's what you are. We run this place together. I thought I was just here, living here because you allowed it. Rowan looked genuinely confused. Did you think this was charity? That I was just putting up with you? Sometimes, yes. Clara. He turned to face her fully. I couldn't run this place without you anymore. The garden alone brings in more money than I made in 3 years before you showed up. The medical work connects us to every family in the territory. You've built something here that's bigger than either of us alone. But it's your land. Is it? Really? Because it feels like ours now. The word hung between them, heavy with implications Clara wasn't ready to examine. She changed the subject and Rowan let her, but the conversation stayed with her through the rest of the day. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed listening to the familiar sounds of the cabin and thought about the future, about what would happen next, where this strange life was heading. She got up and found Rowan sitting by the fire, unable to sleep as well. Can I ask you something? She said. Always. Why did you really take me? Not the anger at my father, not the land dispute. The real reason. Rowan was quiet for a long time. You want the truth? I always want the truth. I saw something in you that day at the outpost, standing there in that ruined dress, looking like your world had ended. You had every reason to break down, to cry, to beg your father to take you back. But you didn't. You just stood there and took it. And I thought... He paused. I thought, here's someone who's survived something I can't even imagine. The kind of survival that doesn't leave marks you can see but breaks you from the inside. And she's still standing. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. I wasn't strong. I was just numb. Sometimes they're the same thing. He looked at her across the fire. I took you because I recognized something of myself in you. Someone who'd been told they weren't good enough their whole life and started to believe it. And I thought maybe, out here, where none of those voices could reach you, you'd figure out they were wrong. Did you figure that out? About yourself? Still working on it, but watching you do it has helped. They sat in silence after that, the fire crackling between them, something unspoken but understood settling into the space they shared. The next morning brought disaster. Clara was in the garden when she heard shouting. She looked up to see smoke, thick black smoke, rising from the direction of the Morrison Ranch, the same place where she'd treated the barn collapse victims. People started arriving within the hour, riding hard, all with the same message: fire, out of control, multiple families trapped. Clara didn't hesitate. She grabbed her medical supplies and rode out with Rowan, her heart hammering against her ribs. The scene that greeted them was chaos: 3 buildings burning, people running, screaming, trying to save whatever they could. "How many injured?" Clara shouted over the noise. "Don't know," someone yelled back. "People are still inside some of the buildings." Clara's blood ran cold. She couldn't treat people who were still burning. She needed them out first. She started to move toward the nearest building, but Rowan grabbed her arm. "Don't. The structure's not safe. There are people in there, and you'll die trying to get them. Let the men handle the rescue. You focus on the ones who make it out." It went against every instinct, but he was right. Clara set up a triage area away from the flames and waited, hands shaking, for the injured to arrive. They came in waves. Burns, smoke inhalation, crushing injuries from fallen beams. Clara worked faster than she ever had, moving from person to person, doing what she could, making impossible decisions about who to help first. A child with severe burns, a man who'd broken both legs, a woman who wasn't breathing and might never breathe again. Clara chose. Again and again she chose who got her attention, knowing that every choice meant someone else had to wait. It was brutal and necessary, and it broke something inside her. Rowan worked beside her, following her orders without question, his steady hands doing whatever she needed. Other people helped too, holding patients down, bringing water, running for supplies. The fire burned for hours. When it finally died down, Claire had treated 23 people. 3 had died despite her efforts. The weight of those deaths settled on her shoulders like stones. As the sun set over the destroyed ranch, Clara sat in the dirt, covered in ash and blood and too exhausted to move. Rowan sat down beside her, equally destroyed. "You saved 20 people today," he said quietly. "I lost 3. You saved 20. It doesn't feel like enough. It never does. But it's everything to the 20 who are alive because of you." Clara looked at the survivors, at families reuniting, at children crying but breathing, at people who would have died without her intervention. "I can't keep doing this," she whispered. "I know." "No, I mean, I can't be the only medical help for hundreds of miles. It's too much. Today proved that. I can't be everywhere at once, can't save everyone, can't carry this weight alone." Rowan was quiet. Then, "So what do you want to do?" Clara thought about the gap she'd fallen into, the need she'd discovered, the purpose she'd found. "I want to teach others, train people in basic medical care so they can help in their own communities. I want to write down everything I've learned, every technique, every treatment. I want to make myself less essential by making knowledge more accessible." "That's ambitious. It's necessary." "Yeah," Rowan agreed, "it is." They sat there as darkness fell, 2 people who'd started as strangers and become something neither of them had planned for. Partners. Friends. Maybe more, though neither was ready to name it yet. The weeks after the fire changed everything. Clara started holding teaching sessions at the cabin, showing anyone interested how to treat basic injuries, recognize infections, deliver babies. She wrote out instructions in careful handwriting, creating guides that could be copied and spread. The garden produced more than they could use, so they traded the surplus for books, medical texts, farming guides, anything with knowledge worth sharing. Clara read voraciously, teaching herself what no school had ever offered to teach her. And slowly, the territory transformed. Other women started gardens. Men learned basic wound care. The community became more self-sufficient, less dependent on the distant doctor or on Clara's intervention alone. Samuel Garrett rode by one afternoon while Clara was teaching a class of 8 women how to recognize and treat infection. "You're really doing this," he said, watching from his horse. "Doing what?" "Changing everything, building something that matters." Clara looked at her students, women of all sizes and backgrounds, all eager to learn. Someone had to. "I was wrong about you," Samuel said. "Completely wrong.
I thought you were nothing without Rowan propping you up. But you're not. You're the one holding this whole territory together. I'm not holding anything together. I'm just teaching people to help themselves. That's the same thing. He tipped his hat. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For how I treated you, for what I said. You're remarkable, and I was too stupid to see it. He rode off before Clara could respond, leaving her standing in her garden, surrounded by students, feeling something she'd never felt before. Respected. Fall arrived with cooler temperatures and the promise of another winter. Clara's preserves sold out at the trading post within a week, earning more money than she'd seen in her life. She and Rowan used it to buy more supplies, more books, materials to expand the cabin. We need more space, Rowan said one evening. People keep showing up for lessons. We could build another room, make it a proper teaching space. We? Well, yeah. This is our place. Might as well make it work for what we're doing. There was that word again. Our. Clara was starting to believe it. They built the addition together, Clara's carpentry skills still clumsy but functional. The work was hard and good, and by the time they finished, they had a dedicated space for teaching and treating patients. More people came. The cabin became a hub, a center of learning and healing. Clara's reputation spread far beyond the immediate territory. Travelers would stop by, asking for advice, bringing news of communities that needed medical help. You could leave, you know, Rowan said one night. Travel to other places, teach more people. You don't have to stay here. Clara looked at him, surprised. Do you want me to leave? No. But I want you to know you could, that you're not stuck here just because this is where you ended up. I'm not here because I'm stuck. I'm here because I choose to be. Yeah?
Yeah. Clara set down the medical guide she'd been writing. This is home. She stopped, not quite ready to finish that sentence. Rowan waited. When she didn't continue, he said, I'm what? You're the reason I believe I matter. The first person who saw me as something other than a disappointment or a burden. And She took a breath. I don't want to be anywhere you're not. The silence that followed felt huge. Then Rowan crossed the room and sat down next to her.
I need to tell you something, he said.
What? I was wrong. Back when I said I took you because I recognized something in you. That's part of it, but not all of it. What's the rest? I was lonely. More lonely than I wanted to admit. And when your father offered that deal, part of me said yes just because I wanted someone else here. Someone to talk to, work with, exist alongside. That probably sounds selfish. It sounds honest.
It was selfish, taking you for my own reasons, not caring what it meant for you.
Rowan.
Clara turned to face him fully. You saved my life. Not in some dramatic way, but in every way that mattered. You gave me space to become someone I could respect. You never made me feel small, even when I felt that way about myself. If you did that for selfish reasons, then I'm grateful for your selfishness. He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. You know what I think? What? I think I was supposed to say yes that day. Not because of fate or destiny or anything like that, but because you needed somewhere to grow and I needed someone to grow with. And we both got what we needed. What did you need? To stop hiding, to be part of something again, He stopped, seemed to struggle with the words. To care about someone who cares back. Clara's heart was hammering. I do care. About you, about this place, about everything we've built. I know. That's why I need to ask you something. What? Rowan reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This is the deed to this property. I've been carrying it around for 2 weeks, trying to figure out how to do this. Do what? This. He unfolded the paper, and Clara saw her name written next to his. I added you to the deed, made it official that this place belongs to both of us. Equal partners in everything. Clara stared at the document, her vision blurring with tears. Why? Because it's the truth. This place is as much yours as mine. More, maybe. You've put more life into it than I ever did alone. He set the paper down between them. But that's not the only question I want to ask. There's more? Yeah. He took her hand, his calloused palm against hers. I want to know if you'd consider making this partnership permanent. Not just business partners, but he struggled for words. Everything partners. Life partners. Together, officially, in every way. Clara could barely breathe. Are you asking what I think you're asking? I'm asking if you'd marry me. Not because you have to, not because there's social pressure or expectations, but because we work better together than apart, And I want to keep doing this, all of it, with you beside me. Clara looked at this man who'd bought her for a land dispute and somehow become her entire world. She thought about the woman she'd been, ashamed and lost and convinced she was worthless. Thought about the woman she'd become, strong and capable and necessary. Yes, she said. 1,000 times yes. Rowan smiled, real and full, and pulled her close. They sat there in their cabin, surrounded by medical texts and preserves and evidence of the life they'd built, and Clara felt complete in a way she never had before. They married in the spring, a simple ceremony with the entire territory in attendance. Sarah came with her daughter, now almost a year old and healthy. Jackson brought his brother, fully recovered. Martha from the trading post cried through the whole thing. Even Samuel showed up, bringing a gift and an apology Clara graciously accepted. Her father didn't come. Clara hadn't invited him, hadn't even considered it. That relationship was dead, had been dead the moment he'd traded her away. She felt no grief over its loss. Standing there in her practical dress with dirt under her fingernails and calluses on her hands, Clara looked nothing like the bride she might have been in Philadelphia. She looked better, real, herself. After the ceremony, people brought food and stories and stayed late into the evening. Clara moved through the crowd, checking on pregnant women, examining a child's healing burn, advising on gardens and medical concerns. "You're working at your own wedding," Rowan observed, finding her in the middle of treating someone's infected cut. "It's what I do. I know. I wouldn't want you any other way." That night, after everyone had left, Clara stood on the porch looking at the stars. Rowan came out and wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Any regrets?" he asked. "About what?" "About this life. It's hard. It'll always be hard." Clara thought about it honestly. No regrets. Not even about Philadelphia, the life you could have had? That was never really my life. It was a performance, and I was terrible at it. This, she gestured at the cabin, the garden, the vast desert. This is real. This is mine. Ours. Ours, Rowan agreed. I like the sound of that. The years that followed weren't easy. Winters were harsh, summers brutal. People still died despite Clara's best efforts. The garden failed sometimes. Money was always tight, but they survived together, and surviving together made them thrive in ways neither could have managed alone. Clara's teaching program expanded. She trained dozens of women in basic medical care, creating a network of healers across the territory. She wrote guides that were copied and shared, spreading knowledge far beyond her reach. The garden became famous, producing vegetables nobody thought could grow in desert soil. Other families started their own gardens, learning from Clara's methods. The cabin expanded again, then again, until it was a proper house with space for patients, students, and the life Clara and Rowan were building. They never had children of their own. Clara's body simply didn't work that way, something she'd once seen as a failure, but now understood as just a fact. Instead, they became essential to dozens of other people's children, teaching and healing and helping raise a generation that knew the desert could be survived and even conquered. 5 years after the wedding, a young woman arrived at the cabin, well-dressed and clearly from back east. Clara was in the garden when she approached. "I'm looking for Clara Whitmore," the woman said. "She doesn't exist anymore," Clara replied, brushing dirt from her hands. "But I'm Clara Hale. Can I help you?" "I'm Emily Rothwell. I'm a reporter writing about frontier medicine. I heard about you from a doctor in Silverton. He says you've saved more lives in this territory than anyone else, despite having no formal training." Clara laughed. "He's exaggerating." "Is he? Because I've been interviewing people all week, and everyone tells the same story. The woman who taught herself medicine and then taught everyone else. The healer who built a network of care from nothing. I just did what needed doing." "That's what everyone says about you, that you don't think of yourself as remarkable, but you are." Emily pulled out a notebook. "Would you be willing to be interviewed? Your story could inspire women all over the country." Clara thought about the girl she'd been, hidden away and ashamed. Thought about the woman she'd become, visible and necessary and proud. "All right," she said, "but you have to understand something first." "What's that?" "This isn't a story about transformation or redemption. It's a story about survival, about learning that the person everyone said you should be was never real, and the person you actually are is more than enough." Emily smiled. "That's exactly the kind of story I want to tell." The interview lasted 3 hours. Emily asked about everything: Clara's childhood, her father's betrayal, the journey to the cabin, learning to survive, building the medical practice. Clara answered honestly, holding nothing back. When the article came out months later, Clara barely recognized herself in it. The reporter had made her sound heroic, larger than life. But reading between the lines, Clara found truth in it. Not the dramatic truth of dime novels, but the quiet truth of someone who'd refused to disappear when the world tried to erase her. People started showing up after that, travelers who'd read the article and wanted to meet the famous Doc Hale. Clara treated them the same as everyone else, with practical kindness and no illusions about her own importance. "You're handling fame better than I expected," Rowan said one evening after a particularly busy day. "It's not fame, it's just people needing help." "It's both, and you're managing not to let it go to your head."
Hard to get a big head when you spend your mornings hauling water and your afternoons elbow deep in other people's medical emergencies. Rowan laughed. Fair point. 10 years after her father had left her at that outpost, Clara stood on the porch of her house, no longer a cabin, but a real home, and watched the sun set over land she owned, a community she'd helped build, a life she'd fought for with everything she had. She was 43 years old. Her body was still large, had actually gotten broader with years of physical work. Her hands were scarred, her face weathered by sun and wind. She looked nothing like the beauty standards she'd grown up failing to meet, and she'd never felt more beautiful. Rowan came out and stood beside her, his own body marked by years of hard work, his hair graying at the temples. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About the day I arrived, how terrified I was, how certain I was that my life was over." "Was it?" "Yes, but that was a good thing. That life needed to end. This one," she gestured at everything around them, "is better. No regrets?" Clara thought about the question seriously, about everything she'd lost and everything she'd gained, about the person she'd been and the person she'd become. "One regret," she said finally. "What's that?" "I regret all the years I wasted believing I wasn't enough, all the time I spent trying to be smaller, quieter, less. That was time I could have spent becoming this." "You couldn't have become this without living through that first." "Maybe, but I still regret it." Rowan pulled her close. "You know what I don't regret?" "What?" "Saying yes that day, taking the deal, bringing you here. Every hard moment, every struggle, every time I thought this was a terrible idea, I don't regret any of it, because it led to this." Clara leaned into him, solid and warm and home. "Me neither. Not anymore." They stood there as stars appeared, the same stars Clara had looked at that first night, terrified and alone and convinced she had no future. She'd been wrong about so many things back then, about her worth, her capabilities, her capacity to matter. The desert had taught her differently, had taught her that value wasn't something given by others, but something claimed through survival, through showing up, through refusing to quit when quitting seemed reasonable. She'd learned that being thrown away wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning. And standing there with Rowan, with their house full of medical texts and preserves, with a community that depended on them and a future that stretched bright and uncertain ahead, Clara understood something fundamental. She hadn't been rescued. She'd rescued herself. Rowan had given her space and opportunity, had seen her potential and refused to accept her self-doubt. But the work of becoming, of transforming from the broken woman at the outpost into the healer, teacher, and partner she was now, that work had been hers alone. "I love you," she said quietly. Rowan's arms tightened around her. "I love you too. Have for years." "Why didn't you say it before?" "Because I wanted you to figure out who you were first. Didn't want my feelings to influence that." Clara turned in his arms to face him. "And now? Now you know exactly who you are. So I can say it without worrying you'll shape yourself around me instead of being yourself." She kissed him then, there on the porch of their home, surrounded by evidence of a life built from nothing. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. The desert breathed around them, vast and harsh and beautiful. And Clara Hale, who'd once been called a burden, smiled and thought, "I am exactly where I'm supposed to be." Years later, when travelers came through asking about the famous Doc Hale, people would tell them the story, but they never got it quite right. They made it sound like a rescue, like Rowan had saved Clara from a terrible fate. The truth was more complicated and more profound. Rowan had given Clara opportunity. The desert had given her challenge. But Clara herself had done the real work, the hard, unglamorous work of survival and growth and becoming. She'd learned that being underestimated was an advantage, that shame was a weapon others wielded but she could refuse to pick up,
She'd learned that worth wasn't measured in dress sizes or social graces, but in calloused hands and saved lives and knowledge shared freely. Most importantly, she'd learned that the person her father had thrown away wasn't worthless. She was just planted in the wrong soil. Out here, in this harsh desert that demanded everything and gave nothing easily, Clara had finally found ground where she could grow. And grow she did, into someone strong and necessary and absolutely, completely herself. The woman who'd arrived in a ruined dress and pearl-buttoned shoes was gone. In her place stood someone better, someone who'd chosen herself when the world tried to choose for her, someone who'd built meaning from rejection and purpose from pain. That night, lying beside Rowan in the darkness, Clara whispered, "Thank you." For what? For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. You would have figured it out eventually. Maybe. But you made it easier. Rowan was quiet for a moment, then, "You made my life better. Made me better. I think that makes us even." Clara smiled in the darkness. Even. Equal. Partners in every sense. She closed her eyes and slept peacefully, dreamlessly, knowing that whatever tomorrow brought, she was ready for it, because she was no longer the girl who'd been thrown away. She was the woman who'd refused to stay discarded, who'd claimed her own value, who'd built a life worth living from the wreckage of expectations. She was Clara Hale, and that, finally, was more than enough.